Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. You're watching TechStrong TV on the Digital Anarchist Network. And welcome to our show for today, April 29th. It's Wednesday, and we've got a great show lined up for you. Before I tell you what we've got in store, just again, quick reminders. Check out our Slack channel, TechStrongTV.slack.com. Also, check out TechStrongCon.com, our virtual event on June 4th, where we'll have a great lineup of speakers. Also, if you're watching this on the TechStrong.tv website, you'll see there's now a live chat window on the right, and you can chat with our speakers, staff in real time. We're experimenting like everyone else is, right? With what's going on in the world, it's a great time to experiment, figure out what works, what doesn't work. So do check out that chat and let us know. Unfortunately, it won't work on the YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn Live, and I don't think it works on our mobile or OTT channels on Amazon, Roku, and Apple TV. But of course, you can watch the show still on those. So look forward to that. Anyway, what do we have in store for today? We got some good stuff. I'm going to start off with an interview with my good friend Tracy Reagan, CEO, founder of Deploy Hub. Tracy, in addition to her Deploy Hub duties, was also just re-elected as the general board member for the CDF, Continuous Delivery Foundation. After that, I've got another old friend, actually a very longtime friend of mine I'm going to be speaking with, Dave Link, CEO, founder of Science Logic. You know, Dave and I first met in 1997. Him and I were the first, his company that he was working for and a company I founded were the first acquisitions of a company that became known as Interliant. And Dave and I, along with Parker Yates, who's still with me here at MediaOps, Dave, Parker, and I were the three amigos running channel sales, direct sales, and business development at Interliant. We had a great time, early .com days. And Dave's been doing Science Logic, I think, since 2001 or so. And it's become quite a company. He'll tell us more. And then from the something old department, it's not that old, from a recent virtual event we did on DevSecOps, highlighting our RSA DevSecOps event, we have Patrick Dubois on behalf of SNCC, and he'll be doing, we'll be replaying his video or presentation from the DevSecOps virtual event and also from RSA, where he spoke about, yes, we're doing DevSecOps. So, and of course, Patrick, if you know, well, most of you know, I'm not going to bother telling you who Patrick is, but anyway, should be a good one on there. I highly recommend it. Then I'll be back here for the news, and then you grab your sneakers, limber up. We've got Jeremy Jones with Working From Home Fitness, WFH Fitness, coming up after the news. Take a little break there. And then we'll throw things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, who has CEO of SourceGraph, Quinn Slack on. And I got to tell you, I met Quinn and became familiar with SourceGraph at one of the events we did last year. I love that company. I think it's a great tool for developers. And I'm sure he'll tell you more about it. Charlene has a great interview with him. And then Charlene also has another good interview with Jason Rader, National Director, Network and Cloud Security from Insight Enterprises. Should be pretty good. And then we'll throw things over to the Analyst Corner with Mitch, where Mitch has, as usual, two segments. One is his thoughts and commentary, and the other is a video that he's doing. And then I'll be back to wrap things up for Wednesday, April 29th. So we've got a great show lined up for you. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Tech is strong. We may be working from home, but tech goes on. Tech will continue to collaborate. Tech will continue to communicate. Tech is strong. Join us for TechStrong Con, June 4th, 12 hours strong, TechStrong. Featuring John Bacigalupe Willis, Shannon Leitz, William Hurley, Jasmine James, Kat Swatell, Cornelia Davis, James Wickett, Courtney Kistler, Damon Edwards. Live Q&A with speakers, exhibit halls, and more. Free, but register before spots fill at techstrongcon.com.
Hey everyone, Alan Schimmel, CEO, founder of MediaOps here. want to personally invite you to join us on June 4th for 12 hours strong of TechStrong. TechStrong Con is our conference that we're putting together. You know, the tech industry is so built, and it was such an integral piece of our existence and identity of going to so many conferences, communicating, collaborating, networking, seeing your friends in the industries, your peers. And you know, just because we can't get together in person anymore, we can certainly do it virtually. We've been doing virtual events at MediaOps for 2 years. We think we've got them down. It's, you know, it's a really immersive experience. But what I'm really excited about with TechStrong is, you know, my friend John Willis, my partner in Digital Anarchist, John's put together an amazing lineup of speakers. I think unlike any you've seen at a virtual DevOps, cloud native, DevSecOps, or cybersecurity related conference before. Check it out. Go to techstrongcon.com. Registration, attendance is free, but space is limited. We hope to see you there. It's 12 hours all day, June 4th. TechStrongCon.com. Stay well, stay healthy, stay strong. TechStrong. Okay, back here in the studios. As I mentioned, our first guest today is the CEO founder of DeployHub. She is also the general board member for the CDF, Continuous Delivery Foundation, part of Linux Foundation. And she was just reelected to her second term, and rightfully so. She's well deserving. She does right. She is the voice of everyone on CDF. It's not, you know, her company isn't one of the sponsors who sort of not bought their seat, but have their seat because of their company. Tracy's really an advocate for the whole community. So I caught up with Tracy Reagan from her house out in New Mexico, and she's doing well, but here's what she has to say.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone. Okay, thanks for joining us for this segment. I'm happy to have as my guest at this segment my friend Tracy Reagan. Tracy, of course, is the CEO founder of DeployHub, as well as a re-elected board member of the CD Foundation, CDF. Tracy, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thank you, Alan. So happy to be here.
Oh, it's our pleasure to have you here and to see you well and healthy and everything. It's
You as well.
perfect. So, Tracy, well, let's start first with a little DeployHub background, right? And I think most of our audience is familiar with DeployHub, but maybe some people aren't. So why don't we go there first? You know, what's the deal with DeployHub?
Yeah, sure. We're the first microservice management platform on the market. It's a hosted product. You can think of us as being an internal marketplace for your microservices, where you can catalog them, organize them, share the details about their configurations, the service-to-service relationships, and then we map them so that you're always in kind of control of what what I call your logical view of your application looks like. Because with microservices, you take your monolithic, you decompose it, and you no longer sort of have an application anymore. We make sure that you always know what your application looks like.
Beautiful. And of course you do that full time, right? This is your company and you run that.
Startup.
And you're a startup, but when you have spare time or you make spare time, you're also a board member, and one of the original board members, I should mention, of the CD Foundation, the CDF, which is a sister organization of Cloud Native Computing, CNCF, and is part of the Linux Foundation. And for those who may not be familiar with the CDF, Trace, I'm going to ask you to give me a similar background on that as well.
Well, the CD Foundation was formed to be a neutral place for CD tools to come together, open source projects, to really define what the CD pipeline is going to look like in the modern architecture.
Fantastic. And so it was founded, I guess we're going into year 2 of CDF now. Is that fair?
We've just passed our 1-year birthday.
Mm-hmm. And you are a board member, and then I think you recently announced that you were reelected for a second term.
Yes, I am what they call the general member board representative, and that is an elected spot. Some of the other spots come because you're a premier member. So it's an honor to be elected to that board by my peers.
Yep. So you didn't buy this one.
No, I didn't buy
Right.
this one. I worked for it.
Exactly, and well deserved, I might add. Tracy, let's talk about. So it is a foundation. So it's meant to, enhance the CD for the whole community. Yes, there are premier members who may be paying more to help, cover the operating costs, etc. But it really is. It's a not-for-profit foundation where, I mean, this is for the good of all, not for the good of just any one company.
Absolutely. And so when you think about open source and some of these tools that have grown in huge numbers in terms of adoption, like Jenkins, what the Linux Foundation really offers at a kind of an umbrella level is the ability to do governing around these open source projects. So with the CD Foundation, you have two really big open source projects that it's governing. One is Jenkins, it's our biggest. Spinnaker is pretty much on its heels. And then we have Jenkins X, which as we move into modern architecture, containerizing those steps in your workflow becomes more essential. And we have, I said Spinnaker, Tecton. And
Yes.
Tecton is something that is being written and led by Google. And it is a CD pipeline that basically is built into Kubernetes, sort of an event-driven model. And then we also have a new one called Screwdriver. So,
Really? Oh, I'm
yeah,
not familiar with that one.
yeah.
What's the deal on Screwdriver?
I haven't taken a close look at it. I think that it is another solution around orchestration. I'm not, and I can't tell you what its high-level benefits are, but the TOC found that it was a good candidate for the open source projects. And to be quite honest, this coming year, I'm hoping that the TOC embraces many more of these open source projects, because the Kubernetes pipeline is actually creating a platform for creating brand new open source projects around this. There are many open source projects out there, and it goes beyond just orchestrating the pipeline. There's an entire ecosystem around it. There is security scanning. There's stuff that we do like configuration management. There is testing. So there's a whole ecosystem that we can start building those open source projects around.
Absolutely. Tracy, and it was last week's show. We had one of the maintainers, I think, for FluentD on, which is, of course, the CNCF project. But, but he gave us a little bit of insight into what it means to be a maintainer in one of these very successful open source projects. FluentD, for instance, has 1,000 plugins. Jenkins has, I don't know how many more than that. I mean, exponentially, probably. Everything integrates with Jenkins at some level. As you mentioned, Spinnaker is becoming very, very, very popular, especially in large deployments. Give our audience, if you can, if you don't mind, really what does it take to manage these projects at that foundational level?
It's, first of all, there's costs associated to it. There is just in terms of like Jenkins, and Spinnaker, there's hosting costs, which is pretty big. There's the cost of managing the pro accounts for the meetups. There is the cost of outreach and putting together and really building the ecosystem in terms of the developer ecosystem. So it's a heavy lift. It is as much of a lift to do that as it is to do a startup. They're very similar, actually. What I'm doing for Deploy Hub often reflects what I need to help with on the CD Foundation side.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
But the good part about the CD Foundation, because it's under the umbrella of the Linux Foundation, we have them to reach out to help with some organizational structure. But then there's quite a bit that we have to do on our own. So there's some work, and just the biggest challenge is just creating an environment for developers from different projects, like from Jenkins X and Spinnaker, to start talking and interoperability issues and solving that, because we need to solve it at the CD Foundation so the users don't have to. The best way to grow the adoption is to simplify as much as you can. And that's one of our strategic goals, is to really push that interoperability between these tools and other tools that will be entering the open source projects, which I'm really pushing them to adopt more open source projects for the CD Foundation that relate to the ecosystem around orchestration.
Great. So, as part of managing a foundation that has whatever it is now, 5, 6 different open source projects, does every board member get involved in every project, or are certain board members kind of specialized or focused on particular projects? How do you make sure that every project gets its due, its fair share of love there?
That's a constant struggle for us, I have to say. But there are board members who come. So, for example, Netflix, who created Spinnaker, they're on the board. Google, who's the creator of Tecton, they're on the board. CloudBees, who are the creators of Jenkins, is on the board. So they have their own vested interest in building those communities. And for example, Tracy Miranda, who is the director of the CloudBees open source, is now going to be the new chair of the board. So while the board members do have particular interests in a particular project, I have found that they have an equal interest in the organization as a whole. Because if the organization is successful, then their project will also be successful. So it's so they're rooting for the whole.
Yep. And then, day-to-day managing the code in these projects and the submissions and what have you, how's that handled?
That's done through there are each project team has each project is project leads, basically, who manage that. So the board doesn't necessarily have to get involved in that. What we do in terms of governing or make sure that things like all of the guidelines are clearly defined on GitHub. So if you go to the repository, you understand the rules of the game. So we democratize it as much as possible so everybody understands, how they play. And then the board does some other things, like in the outreach world, who can submit blogs, pushing webinars for different projects and different members, doing, adding press releases to newsletters. We have an ambassador program. Jackie Salinas, the director of ecosystem, has spent a lot of time building up an ambassador program, and those ambassadors represent all the projects. So they may be a specialist in Jenkins X, or they may be a specialist in Spinnaker.
Got it. All right, Tracy, if you don't mind, I'm going to pivot here and let's talk Deploy Hub a little bit. So
Sure.
Everyone's working from home. We've got the quarantine, everything going on. What has this meant in terms of for Deploy Hub?
Well, we have been pretty busy over the course of the last year, getting Deploy Hub up and running in a SaaS model, getting adoption, building out a few of our first enterprise customers. And initially we saw people kind of asking for demos and whatnot, and then it started slowing down. It was almost like they were at home. They didn't know really how to manage themselves, so they were just doing some research. So right now we're taking advantage of the quiet time and doing a big redesign of our front end. So we have a pretty major release that will come out probably end of May, just about the time the rest of us will be coming out.
Hopefully, yes.
Yes. So we've done that. We have shifted, though, in terms of our meetup and our outreaches. We used to do local meetups for the CD Foundation, and we're not doing that. We're doing now online webinars for the CD Foundation, and we still call it a New Mexico meetup, but it's hosted online. Mm-hmm. And in a weird way, I think that'll work out for the best, because it causes you to say, I can reach out to anyone now. I don't have to just reach out to my local community, and so it'll broaden our exposure that we're actually doing technology in the state of New Mexico, which is good at the end of the day for Deploy Hub as well. And I think that the CD Foundation has gone through, or the Linux Foundation is going through a, sort of a come to Jesus moment as well. They have some pretty big shows, and they're working pretty hard to shift and pivot to be able to host those virtually over the next, I think, 12 months.
I agree. I think really, at least into next year, I don't know what the future, if people are going to be keen to go into shows where there's 10,000 plus people, and that's
Not until there's a vaccine.
yeah, I agree with you, Tracy. That's where that is. But the good news is there's positive. Go ahead.
The one thing I have noticed, though, is that when a company has had to shift, now we are pretty much remote.
Right.
We've always worked remote. And we know how to do decision making over Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
We've gotten good at it. But I have found that other companies who are used to collecting themselves in a conference room and doing decision making tend to have a problem shifting that, and I don't know why, shifting that to home from a remote.
No, it's beyond just that decision. Companies that I think had adopted sort of DevOps, agile, cloud native kind of technologies, I think have found a much easier transition here. Companies that didn't are having a harder time. But here's the thing. If you didn't do it before, you're kind of stuck with what you're stuck with, right?
Exactly.
And you're going to have to muddle through. But soon as you can, you'd be silly not to now go cloud native, adopt these kinds of agile DevOps kinds of ways of looking at stuff. So, you are positioned to be more nimble.
And if you think about how we have, here we're on a Zoom meeting, and how many thousands of people are on a Zoom meeting at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these tools that we're using that are built on a more cloud native platform are having a lot easier time of scaling than ones that aren't. And this is going to be a lesson for a lot of people.
Well, it's the internet in general. Look, this thing was built to withstand a nuclear war, right?
Right.
Maybe not a pandemic, but it's held up. Knock wood, right? It's held up marvelously considering the load on it and everything else. So, thankful for small things. But they'll look with every kind of tumult, with every kind of storm, there are lessons learned, there are winners, there are losers. I think some of the winners here will be companies who are cloud native, who are nimble, agile, DevOps, whatever you want to call it. And we'll see that happening. Anyway, though, Tracy, we're about out of time. I gotta pull the plug on this one. Congratulations on your re-election to the board. It means something to be voted by your peers.
Thank you.
Number one. Yep. Number two, keep up the great work at Deploy Hub.
Right.
Will do.
And
keep growing it. Number three, and more importantly, stay safe for you and your family. And I hope one day to see you again at a show in person soon.
Yes. Remember, I was going to come see you in Florida this year, and that got nixed. I'm so sorry for that.
We'll be here. We'll still welcome you. Well, they opened the beaches here, but let's not even go there.
Oh, I might get on a plane.
No, that's okay. I wouldn't want you to. Actually, the beaches at our house, they won't be open anytime soon. We're in southern Florida. It's kind of a different vibe. Anyway, Tracy Reagan, CEO Deploy Hub, General Board Member, CDF. Thanks for being our guest on TechStrong TV. Take care.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, this is Alan Schimmel. We'll be back with our next guest in a minute.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Back here in the studio. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I first met Dave Link, CEO of Science Logic, back in 1997. I had co-founded a company called TriStar Web, an early web hosting company. And we were in the process of being acquired in a roll-up. At the time it was called Sage Networks. It then went on to become Interliant. And we were the second acquisition. The first acquisition was a small company that was doing some IBM-related work out of Northern Virginia. And the manager of that company was a fellow named Dave Link. They bought that company the week before they bought my TriStar Web company. And Dave and I stayed with what became Interliant all the way through 2001. And that involved 30 more acquisitions in about 36 months. IPO. We rode that whole dot-com bubble up and then unfortunately back down. Actually, it was Dave. Dave was the, eventually became VP of channel sales. And Parker Yates, who works with me now at Media Ops still, was VP of direct sales, and I was VP of biz dev. And the three of us were kind of the three amigos. We had some great times during the dot-com days, and I got to know Dave very well. After Interliant, Dave went off and founded a company called Science Logic, based upon a lot of what we saw and learned and realized needed to be done at Interliant. And Dave has been there now 16 years plus and has built Science Logic into quite a powerhouse. So it's always good to catch up with Dave. Link had a chance to speak with Dave and find out what's new at Science Logic. And here's our conversation.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here for our next segment on TechStrong TV. My guest for this segment is I was going to say an old friend, but he's not old. He's just a friend that I know for a very long time. None other than Mr. David Link. He's CEO, founder of Science Logic. Dave, welcome.
Thank you, Alan. Great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. I was telling you off camera, I gave you the big lead, and you and I know each other, Dave. I guess it's late 97 because I think I sold my company to Sage Networks. It was February of 98. So it was probably right then. And it was a
flashpoint for the next part of your professional journey.
It was. Well, the flashpoint, Dave, was working with you and Parker and, of course, Rick Rose. I don't know if Rick's probably not watching this, but, man, what a time those days were, weren't they, Dave? It was the dot-com boom, and it was a boom.
It was a boom.
We had
Everybody needed a website, and they needed e-commerce, and they needed it yesterday.
Dave, I still remember you directing people to, okay, Michael Dell's coming, let's put up those Dell servers, and then when Michael Dell leaves, put the Sun servers back up, the EMC Symmetrics, the IBM Sharks, whoever was coming to visit us in the data center, that's whose machines you were pumping up in the up and down the rows. Those were fun times, man.
Well, you had to be aligned with your go-to-market partners, so.
Absolutely, and you were a great channel.
Good times. But Dave, let's flash forward. So we all left Interliant, the dot-com bubble burst. You started Science Logic right in the middle of all that, right? Right at the dot-com bubble burst, which is always a good time to start a company when, just like we're going through now. I think you're going to see a lot of companies that'll be founded out of this. But anyway, you've spent the last 18, 19 years, right? Building Science Logic into a market leader. I think most of our audience is familiar, Dave, but in case they're not, why not give them a little background?
Sure. So this is a company that I started, I think it's been 17 years ago. Time flies. But I started it really at the heart of coming out of the dot-com era where all the music stopped and everybody had to find a chair. And if there wasn't, you were out of a job and the companies went bankrupt. So it was a really hard time to start a company because there wasn't any funding, there wasn't any financing. I had to self-finance it for, candidly, the first 7 years of starting the company. And you had to prove it out. You had to have a solution that solved the problem people cared about and that they'd pay you for, and they'd pay you for it quickly. It had to actually deliver real value. So that was the basis from which we started the company. And as Alan and I worked through the early days of web hosting, and back in that era, it was called Application Service Providers. ASP was the acronym.
Mm-hmm.
So ASPs hosted a number of applications that we would now think of as software as a service. So
Yeah.
it was the early days of software as a service were the early days of Microsoft experimenting with Word online and with Exchange before we know of Exchange as we know it today with
Hosted Exchange. There was no hosted Exchange then.
That's
I mean,
right.
truth be told, Dave, we were Lotus Notes experts, right? And
We were. So we were
I don't even know if they.
Yeah.
in the early era of hosting Lotus Notes as an application delivered as a service, a
Yeah.
turnkey service. So we learned a lot. And one of the things that was my inspiration point, both Alan and I were trying to deliver that great customer experience, that resiliency. People expect if they're going to outsource any IT services, whether it's as small as a website or as material as outsourced Lotus Notes hosting or Exchange hosting or anything like that, that it better work better, cheaper, and deliver an experience to the end user that is as good as the current company's IT team can provide, but probably better, cheaper, faster. And so this is the basis by which our businesses were built upon. Alan's business, when I was working for, we rolled up a number of hosting companies and application service providers to build what was the largest, one of the largest hosting companies in the United States and one of the fastest growing in the world. We grew it to about $2 billion market cap and 1,700 people around the world. Very, very quickly. I took it public, and it was an amazing learning experience. But at the core of it, what Alan and I both knew was if our operations teams couldn't have insight proactively into how the network was behaving and how the servers and how the applications, the website applications, how the load balancers, how the firewalls, how every aspect of technology that came together to deliver the service. If the operations team couldn't get proactive insight to that, they were going to disappoint. There would be network outages. There would be failures. There would be things that we didn't predict or anticipate. And in the service provider realm, when you don't deliver that great service quality and you get caught flat-footed 2 or 3 times for your customers, they go somewhere else.
Yep.
So we knew we had to build a better operational model, and it started with tooling, and that was the genesis for Science Logic. We had about 18 to 20 tools at our previous company, and that was just too complicated. It was too hard for operations to figure out what was happening across all those tools when you kind of tried to bring them together in the eyes of the operations team. How was the network, the systems, the data center, the applications behaving all at once? And you had to look at 12 or 14 different screens to figure that out, depending upon what technology you were monitoring and administering. So we built the company was sold. I left the company and started Science Logic to basically bring together a unified management monitoring platform that took all my know-how and candidly my living through the school of hard knocks, as Alan and I both did.
Dave, I tell people this all the time. Really, Science Logic was born out of your frustration of trying to keep our network running and these apps that we talked, because it wasn't just Lotus Notes. We were hosting PeopleSoft and Onyx and Lawson and Oracle for a while there, right? And there was, look, there wasn't the VMwares and all of the cloud stuff that we take for granted today, right? There was a tremendous amount of frustration. It was spitball and chewing gum in a lot of places. And Science Logic grew out of that. But I think, and that in itself, Dave, is a tremendous accomplishment of which, as Len Fassler would say, you should be very proud. But fast forward to today, right? Look at where you were then to what's the mission. Science Logic's mission is very similar still, right? It's about keeping those networks and applications up and running. But look how you're doing it now to then, Dave. Contrast that for our audience.
Well, it's really been a fascinating journey. And it's fascinating because, of course, we're all working in IT. IT never sleeps. There's no holidays. There's no vacations. People expect perfection night or day, no matter where you are in the world. And that puts a lot of pressure on companies like Alan and myself and organizations that strive to deliver that impeccable service quality no matter what. And we know IT is hard. It's made up of many different technologies that any one of them can have a failure or a contention or capacity overloads, as we've seen with COVID-19. Network anomalies are prolific because the network's being used in very different ways than when we were working in our offices.
Yep.
All of those things lead together to build really what we've been working on for the last 17 years. And that is a proactive, as the world becomes more digital, and we all have digital experiences that are the lifeblood, whether it's a video that we watch, or whether it's an e-commerce app that we need, or whether it's a website that's got insight and information that gives us line of sight to what's happening with COVID-19 and the spread throughout the world. We have become a digital set of creatures, and thus we expect systems to work impeccably. If there's anything that I've seen change a lot, Alan, over that time period, when we started, devices were quite physical in nature, i.e. there was a server, there was a switch, there was a load balancer, and there was monitoring that you would assign and instrumentation to each device. Over the last really 10 years, we've largely virtualized, 15 years, we've virtualized a lot of those dedicated
Software.
to virtual infrastructure, which has kind of created an abstraction layer on top of the virtual server. And you were one of the early pioneers in creating it, where you created an abstraction layer on a server to deliver virtualized hosting.
Yep.
So you weren't VMware, you were delivering the same functionality of VMware when you started your company, and you innovated upon how do I split up one server to serve 200, 500, 1,000 websites versus one. So virtualization isn't far from that. But I'd say if we look now over the last 10 years at the application layer, it was largely a Java-driven application programming language. And we saw the rise of APM tools, application performance management tools, that inserted an agent to figure out what was happening in the Java virtual machine because it was complex. Developers needed to understand where the problem was. And was it infrastructure? Was it application? Was it too many users? Where is the problem? We've now seen with the rise of public cloud, and you've been a prolific supporter of the DevOps and SecOps growth. As you migrate applications to the cloud, you really have to change them and compartmentalize them into containers so that they can scale horizontally, rather than when we started our careers, you were scaling applications vertically. You just put more horsepower on the machine.
Right.
Memory, faster disk. Well, that only takes you so far. Eventually you have breakage on what that machine can do. So you have to grow horizontally. And not all applications were built to run that way. So over the next 10 years, we're going to see most of these really big applications that were based on a Java virtual machine world be broken up into containerized applications where we can spin up more and more containers to run the process that we want to scale out. And then we can run it cost effectively in the public cloud. Well, that creates yet another abstraction layer on top of the virtual machine with a container. So now you think we're back to 2 layers of abstraction. The same thing's happening in network. Alan was a prolific networking expert in his day. And interestingly, you went from where we were, which was frame relay, to MPLS, now to SD-WAN, which is in another abstraction layer on top of MPLS. So all of these technologies are getting abstracted, but you still have to manage and instrument them as though they're like a unique device. And that's what makes our product unique, that we've been through all these interesting innovation cycles. Most of our customers still have one foot connected in the legacy data center, which is highly virtualized, but some dedicated machines. They also have another foot in public cloud with a cloud first mentality. And so they got to manage both of those through one system. And that's what our product is particularly good at.
Well, Dave, it's also the nature of the beast. Change is constant in technology. I think everyone recognizes that. But what sometimes people forget is they think just because we have this shiny new toy over here, somehow this became obsolete, and not only obsolete, but we threw it away. We never throw anything away. We just build one on top of the other in a very usually organic kind of just layered, like looking at strata, like we're geologists, right? And
good analogy.
But so you look at the average large enterprise, right? And you can almost see the layers built on top of each other, right?
That's
From
right.
the data center and the hardware to the virtualized, to the container, to the public, to the serverless, and whatever else comes next.
Yeah, so what we wanted to do, Alan, was what you and I had dreamed of at the very beginning. We wanted to simplify the lens for what's happening in IT and the services we deliver across all those layers.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to have 50 tools do it and try to stitch all those together with a Miracle Whip coding level that synthesized data into an unmanageable hub. Every time one of those products gets updated, it breaks the connective tissues, so you can't really see what's going on. So we essentially built a model to pull all these disparate data streams into one big analytics tool so that we could see in context how they were all relating together. And that's what I have come to find with our biggest customers around the world. They use us to understand all the layers across multi-cloud, public cloud, private cloud, the network layer, the voice layer, the video layer, all these different services that you end up delivering in the day in the life that IT has to make sure works to the end user's expectations. That is the challenge that we're solving with our product.
Got it. So, Dave, we only got a few minutes left. How's this COVID-19 thing affecting business?
It's hard. I must tell you that you and I have lived through some tough times in our life. And I would say, my heart goes out to anybody who's had family and friends affected by this terrible disease. It's taken the world in a way unlike we've ever seen in our lives. We've been through 9/11. We were through the crash of in the 80s of the stock market. We've been through the dot-com crash. We were through the last financial Great Depression, which was like financially engineered versus other engineering. And then this, we're working in the biggest, greatest booming economy in the globe perhaps has ever seen 3 months ago, to perhaps one of the biggest drops of GDP growth, unemployment claims that the world's ever seen in the shortest period of time. So the future is unbelievably cloudy. I was mentioning to my colleagues on an all hands on Friday, it seems like I'm driving the car. I'm in an incredibly thick fog. I can't really see what's in front of me. Am I going to hit a tractor trailer? And am I going to blow through a stop sign? What is happening next? It's getting a little thinned out right now, but I can't tell if customers are going to be in a position where they'll continue buying, if the buying cycle will continue or it'll fall off a cliff, if people will pay on time or have the ability to pay on time. All these things that affect a business's cash flow and ability to make payroll, and all the things that everybody's struggling with. We're blessed to be in IT because my heart goes out to anybody in the hospitality, restaurant, travel industry. These are industries decimated with not a clear line of sight to return and or a pathway to return to what we knew prior to COVID-19 from a business.
Yeah, no. I mean, Dave, I tell people, look, the governments, governors, presidents, I don't care. They could say whatever they want. We are an economy built on consumer confidence. And until consumers are confident that they can go to a restaurant without the danger of contracting this disease, or do things in a group setting. You're right. It's a blind man in a round room looking for a corner. There is none, right? And it's a hard thing. My heart does go out to them. We are blessed in tech. I'm here. I told you off camera. I do these interviews because it keeps me connected. I think the 7,000 people a day we have watching this watch this because it helps keep them connected
with the industry.
And we so thank you for doing it, because if there's anything that I've learned, that this self-isolation, even though we have Slack and Teams and WebEx and all the tools that we use, the company's been very fortunate to maintain. I've been blown away by the ingenuity and adaptability of our team to work remotely without really missing too much what would seem to be a productivity hit. The company's doing very well, or again, in a very fortunate position to say that. But one of the things that I'll tell you, Alan, that I'm stunned by is just how much resiliency.
Yeah, that's a good word. They do. People put their head down. They're doing what they got to do here, and it's important. Right. Yeah. Dave, I got to hang up. Unfortunately, we have our next guest in the green room coming on. But hey, man, it's a pleasure to see you, my friend. Stay well and stay healthy. When this is over, we'll do an in-person. I keep threatening to come to Virginia and visit you, and I will. I promise.
We'd love to do that, and love to help all your DevOps customers with our solution when the time is right. But thanks for all you do for the community, Alan.
Thank you, Dave. Hey, be well. Say hello. David Link, CEO, founder, Science Logic, here on TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest.
Right now, software is more important than ever. It is powering the online services enabling teams to connect, collaborate, and work remotely, and allowing innovation to continue to get to market rapidly. CloudBees offers software delivery automation solutions to support all remote teams, and you can use the best-in-class tools you need to get the job done. CloudBees helps you build stuff that matters. Visit cloudbees.com to learn more.
Back here in the studio, we're getting ready for our next segment. As I mentioned in our Something Old archive today, we're going to play something actually not that old. It's recently from this year's RSA event, as well as it was played at our virtual DevSecOps event. And it features Patrick Dubois, who's now at SNCC, and Patrick's going to give his take on DevSecOps. Most of you already know Patrick was the man who really gave rise to the term DevOps. And in many ways still nurtures the whole community and movement, though I'm not sure it's gone in ways that he would have imagined back then. But he's recently joined SNCC and doing a great job there as a DevOps advocate. So here's Patrick Dubois from SNCC on DevSecOps.
Good morning, and thank you for all being here. I'm joining you from remote because I can't make it to the event. My name is Patrick Dubois, and I'm the Director of DevOps Relations at SNCC. And today I'm going to be talking about DevSecOps in the context of trust. So a little bit about me. I've been active in DevOps for about 10 years, and I've been there from the very beginning, from when the word DevOps was started at the very first DevOps days. And I saw DevOps expanded into this cultural movement beyond the tools. And with the help of some friends, I even wrote the DevOps handbook, which bundled many of the stories I've seen, all about focused on some were tools, but overall, most of it on culture. And, joining SNCC, I binge watched many talks about the word DevSecOps, and it really made me sad watching that many of the discussions were about the tools. And so do we really need all these tools to, do DevSecOps or to understand DevSecOps? And believe me, I'm not here as a tools vendor, but you do have to believe me that it's not about the tools. So this slide will be the last tool slide. I'm sorry for those. You can still leave the room. I won't even see you, so don't worry about it. And I believe, beyond the tools, that we have a bigger issue at hand, which is about trust. 10 years ago, security was already on mind of people during DevOps, but it took us a while as the industry to mature. And now, recently, the bottleneck has moved not between Dev and Ops, but to security. And so, they're late to the party, but, there's still a party going on. So don't worry about it too much. But we need to get better at learning this trusting. Because, this is how I thought about security in the last decade. It's basically security 101 is about like trust no one. And what's the same thing happened in ops. Like nobody was trusting ops. They couldn't do their job. If some people remember the comic Bastard Operator from Hell, it was about an unreliable person not to be trusted. That's how Shadow IT got born. People went to the cloud just to evade their people. And, things with security is happening the same. They're looking at creative ways just to go around like company policies. So in this slide, I started talking to many of the security folks. And whenever I would bring up the trust issue, they say, yeah, it's all this good. It's all good, but it is trust and verify. So we need to verify. And I do want to believe in their good intentions. And I'm not saying this is about policing the dev and the ops. And I'm hoping there is a better way of working and collaborating than we used to do before of saying no. While exploring ideas around DevOps, I came across the research that Mark Burkis did around promise theory. And it is an interesting model to reason about technology, about the system we're working in, because, a lot of DevOps is about system thinking. And, the collaboration is something that is very embedded into promise theory. So everybody in the system is an agent, and, we make promises to other people in the agent, in the system, and promises should be verifiable. But, the guarantee is not there that it will be that outcome. And that's pretty much like ops learned that it wasn't about building these perfect architectures that could never fail, but we learned to live with things that fail. We learn to live about security that's not perfect, and to be more about being resilient and making sure that we can deal with the things that we didn't anticipate. So another part that Mark pointed out is that, it's easy when you have evidence that something is not secure. Like if we know there's a bug, we know, there's an attack vector, then it's easy. We know it's not secure, or in which circumstances it's not secure. But you don't always have that evidence. And then it becomes a little bit gray. Like if you don't know if it's secure or you have no evidence, is it secure or isn't it? You can't really tell. And that's many of the situations that we're having right now. And we don't need to fool ourselves. The fact that the CI pipeline detects a lot of stuff, that is a good thing, but it doesn't really make us feel perfectly secure. It builds upon the confidence with that we don't find issues, but we're not sure there aren't any issues. So trust goes beyond that. If we want to trust the system, we have to deal with it in a different way. In this presentation that John Osborne did at Monitorama, he did like an interesting thought experiment. He asked the audience about imagine the systems are not changing and you don't change any of the systems. How long will it run fine? Will it run for a day, for 2 days, for 5 days if you don't touch them? Many people start getting uneasy after a couple of days, and it is not unusual because part of what makes the system work is the human. And the humans are part of the system we work with the tools. So we need to be conscious about that. It's not only a tool solution, but part of the system is also dealing with the humans. And on a related note, John Willis showed in his presentation that, which environment do you think can respond the best to unknowns? Is it a system that is perfectly structured or very deeply structured? Or is it the one that has many degrees of freedom where the humans can decide? Obviously, it's somewhere in the middle, but it isn't the perfect and hard controlled thing that we want to have. There has to be a way to have the humans to make decisions or things that are harder to decide. And another example of how we are dealing all the time with humans is actually the pipeline or the flow itself. A lot of people think it's about getting the software moving, but it's actually about the humans talking around the process. They decide things, they verify things, they look at things, they triage things. So in reality, there is a mixture between tools and having humans at work. And, I hear somebody at the back, even I'm not here, I can just so hear it. Like, trust no one. I will still trust no one. This is not something we want to do. And, we can even have separation of duties, going at DevOps speed. It's all about being more transparent about the things you do and to utilize the human factor if the tools can't solve it. And I know that sounds scary, but you gotta believe that humans are part of the solution to deal with issues. So what we are basically doing is building a team. We're building a team across DevSec and Ops. And part of being a good team is having a good fundamental trust. And we're so focused on gaming the results on the upper end, the results with tools, like can we fix it? But what we are not doing is building the trust between the teams. And that's what makes a team last. And, not trusting people is really costly. We have meeting after meeting after meeting to ask permissions, to decide things together. Sometimes it is very costly to do that. In fact, most of the time it's actually costly because if you don't show the trust that people can decide things, that might show that you have a culture that is not fostering that trust. Looking around for a model on trust, I came across this book, The Thin Book of Trust, and it revolves around 3 parts. Sincerity. Do you walk the walk? Do you walk the talk? Are you reliable? Reliability. Can people depend on you? Are you competent? Competence. Are you competent to do your job, and do you really care? You can be sincere, reliable, and competent, but not care. And people will see that, and they might just not trust you, even though you have all the 3 other components. And while listening to the security folks, it was really interesting once you got beyond their tools discussion, what they want. And basically, it fitted the model perfectly. They wanted to be considered during sprint planning. So just be there on the backlog as something to do. They wanted to make sure that they were on the mind all the time, every feature. So they wanted to have this reliability of the developer thinking about that all the time. They wanted to be the developer more competent. So the developer had to learn more security practices. And the developer needed to care. And that's easy to say because, security is security's job all the time. So why would the others care? And that's what made it a little bit harder. So what a developer wants from security is they want to know that they're sincere. And you become sincere by understanding that there's more things and priorities than just security, and that there's a balance you have to find on the backlog. You also want to be there when they're having issues or when the stories are reviewed. And part of not being there doesn't make you a reliable person because you're not there. And they want to become more competent, the developers, but they want somebody else also to teach them and to explain this technical security issue to them that they didn't know existed. And also, they care about the system. And, the more you follow the model, you build it, you run it, like this ownership builds up in the team, and they become also, caring about security as well. And what we're aiming at is that security is a non-blocking thing and it's a self-servicing thing. So you can teach the others to do the things that they need to be doing during their job. During a talk, Zane Lackey gave a good example of how they changed the approach at Etsy. So imagine a sensitive configuration file. Nobody's normally allowed to touch it unless you have approval from 5 people. But now also imagine it's 2 a.m. in the morning and there is like a deep problem in production and somebody needs to touch that file. Will you wait for 5 people to get the approval? Waiting. So they changed their model by saying whenever somebody wanted to touch the file, it would give a warning. Are you sure you want to do this? This will go out to 5 people if you do this. And people feeling competent and confident to do the change and that it needs to be done, they can do their jobs. For people not feeling confident, it will be enough to say, I'm not going to touch this. This is not something I should be doing. So what they did in the end, they trusted the operator as well, not just the process. Another example is, many tools will check vulnerabilities and, it's all good, but we're actually also relying on humans and tools to report those vulnerabilities. So they are part of our solution. And we want developers to become aware of the issues. So, we notify them during the development process and we allow them to fix the problems themselves. This enablement of security, giving that to developers is something that really works well. But it's more than just checking the vulnerabilities. The trust of a library has actually happened way before that. There are many things that a developer considers in selecting a library, and it also has to do with the trust model. Is this library sincere? So do they follow their own code of conduct? Are they friendly to new people? Are they open to new ideas? Are they reliable? What about issues after releases? How often do they release? Is there a cadence? Do other libraries depend on that? Are they competent? So do they have tests? Are there readmes? Is there a change log? Are there release files? Has it been audited? Is the code well written? Many things to pick up and check the reliability, trusting the library. And then the last one is, does the library still care? Is the pull request too open too long? Are there too many forks? What about the last commit date? All these kind of things, how long did it take to fix the security? All the things that show that people care about the library. And there's one thing that is getting in our way is that we generally think about ourselves being more trustworthy than the other thinks of us. So we need to be aware of that. And one of the reasons that is that we judge ourselves by our intentions and others judge ourselves by our behavior. So we have the hypothetical ideal case in mind, but the others are seeing the reality. And that's a lot more complicated. And this process takes time. So all these for kind of aspects, they take time. But in many cases, a tool can get a good discussion going, and you look at the value stream and at the system, and you can discover many things together. So true DevSecOps is when you get beyond the tools and you start building the DevSecOps as a team or as a group that really works together in cases that you didn't anticipate with the tools or the things that you can detect with that. On the flip side, we need to be aware that we need to become more trustworthy. So that means we have to do the same things that other people expect from us. And so we have to learn things, we have to be sincere, we have to come to meetings, we have to be, understanding, having empathy, all the same thing of becoming trustworthy to somebody else. And here's some homework that you can use to explore some of these building of trusts. I want to give a special call out to Agile Conversations, which is the first book I read about digital transformation in the light of having like interpersonal communications or collaborations. It's about having the hard conversations. When you don't agree, how can we get better at that? How can we say things to improve and encourage others? And it's building upon that trust. It's not yet out, but it will be published soon. And as a last note, I want to say that, all change is hard. Maybe in 2021, people will say, you've tried DevSecOps, it just didn't work. It's so 2020, but you just got to believe and keep going. And as long as we improve our human skills, we have a chance. And it will not just be about the tools. With this, I want to say thank you and enjoy the rest of the conference. If you want to reach out to me, I'm Patrick Dubois on Twitter, or just send me an email. Let me know if this presentation resonated with you, or if you have any questions. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Okay, good interview, or a good presentation there from Patrick Dubois. Now it's that time of the day where we go to the news. So let me give you a couple headlines. On Security Boulevard, we have a COVID email attack or email harvesting. Look, this COVID thing has been a panacea for hackers and bad guys, and we're continuing just to see fallout around that. It's not enough that we got to worry about getting sick and everything else. We got to worry about the hacking around it, and it's disturbing. But anyway, it's a good article on there. Why U.S. software companies don't have to protect our data. So, the title is a little bit misleading. Really, the article is about that, pursuant to some of the federal data acts that came in to place after 9/11 and afterwards, the government really has access to a lot of data if they want it via your software partners. And especially now as we move to online and virtual events, you really can't have much confidence that your data is exempt from the government or other operators utilizing it. So good article there to check it out. Over on Container Journal, excuse me, we have an article on Kaloom partners with Red Hat on container networking, and it comes out of course, the Red Hat Summit virtual event is up, and this is part of the news around that. Exploring SMI, the service mesh industry spec is out. It's a good article. And then ThreatStack reports highlights on common Kubernetes security issues. Good stuff there on Container Journal. And just real quickly, continuing in our Red Hat coverage, Red Hat extends the scope of Ansible tools, and that again comes out of the virtual Red Hat event going on. So please do check that out. And I think that's going to do it for our news today. I wanted to now, let's limber up, get your sneakers on, and our personal trainer extraordinaire, Jeremy Jones, is going to give us one of his personal training sessions, work from home, WFH Fitness with Jeremy Jones, right now.
Hey guys, Jeremy here, back again with another work from home exercise brought to you by MediaOps. So guys, if you haven't checked out this series, you can find that on TechStrong.tv. You can find it on Amazon Fire, Roku, Apple TV. Almost forgot that one. But so what we're doing is we're taking everyday exercises that you could do with things simply found around the house, right? So, gyms are closed and we're not able to get out to work out as much as we want. So these are going to be designed whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or a little bit more advanced. So what we're going to do first, go through a warm-up. We're going to do about 20 to 30 seconds of bodyweight squats. We'll go through hamstring stretches, arm circles, alternating toe touches, and knee grabs. So let's get into our warm-up. All right, guys, so getting warmed up, we're gonna start it out 20, 30 seconds. We're gonna keep our weight back on our heels. We're doing body weight squats. Now, I'm gonna try to start out, not going quite as low, go a little bit slower. And then as I progress, I'm gonna try to get a little bit deeper into that squat. Everybody's got their own range of motion. So if you can't quite make it down as far as I am, that's okay. If you can make it down even further than me, even better. So make sure you're pushing those hips back, butt goes back. Keep your weight on your back heels. We're gonna go for another 3, 2, last one, and going right into our hamstring stretching. So I'm gonna start out on my right side, keep that leg straight, reach down, try to touch your toes. Gotta keep that leg straight. We're gonna just alternate each side. Good. I'm gonna try to hit each side at least 10 times. Get those hamstrings nice and warmed up. Good, let's go. 2 more each side. Good, last one. And I'm trying to get a little bit deeper into these stretches each time I go through. All right, next up, we're gonna go arm circles. We're gonna go start out small. Nice, small circles. Good, now we're gonna reverse it. Get those shoulders nice and loose, warm up that upper body. Good, now I'm gonna reverse it again, only I'm gonna go wider, bigger arm circles. Good, on that 5th one, I want you to reverse it one more time. And big arm circles to the back. And good. Next up, we've got our alternating toe touches. So we're gonna take a nice wide stance, legs straight. We're gonna reach over and rotate, touching toes, coming up to the top, opening up that chest each and every time. Good, we'll go one more each side. And we're gonna finish it off with our knee grab. So grab that knee, pull it up and into your chest as high as you can. Again, if you can't quite make it all the way up, it's all right. Everybody's got their own range of motion. Good, I'm gonna grab and hold. Grab and hold. Again, trying to get a little bit deeper into that hamstring. We'll go one more each side. And good. All right, guys, now that we're all warmed up, let's jump into the workout. Hey guys, so really excited about this workout today. So today we're gonna be doing an EMOM workout. So EMOM is an acronym for every minute on the minute, which means I'm gonna be doing a pair of exercises, given the rep count here. I'm gonna do that and whatever time that I have left within that minute, that's the time that you have to rest. So for example, I'm going to be doing 15 jump squats, 20 shoulder taps. If I've got 20 seconds left, I've got 25 seconds left. At the end of that, that's the time I'm going to be resting. Trust me, we're going to be going through 5 rounds. By the time you hit that 5th round, that time's going to sneak up on you. So we'll go through and demonstrate each one. So with our jump squat, first of all, if you're more of a beginner, just do regular squats just like we did in warm-up, just our regular body weight squats. For my more advanced, we're gonna jump, okay? So with those are the jump squats, and then we're gonna move right into shoulder taps. So take it down into a plank position. And I'm just gonna tap my shoulder right here. Now, if that's a little bit too much for you, find a nice stable surface like a table, something that's going to be fixed. And then we're going to go shoulder tap this way. So that's going to, be a little bit easier than taking it all the way down on the ground. You're not going to have your total body weight with that. For our next set, we're going to do bend and thrust and side-to-side push-ups. So for my bend and thrust, I'm going to take my hands to the ground, kick my feet back, feet forward, come up, that's one. So down and up. So for my beginners, again, nice sturdy surface. I'm going to do the same thing, kick my feet out, come up, out, and up. After my bend and thrust, I'm going to go side to side push-up. So in push-up position, so hands mid-chest. We're going to go a little bit wider. I'm going to lean to the right, take it down, over to the left, and over. So for my beginners, if you can't make it all the way down to the ground, not a problem. Take it down maybe half to a quarter of the way down and just shift from side to side. Last but not least, we've got our knee-ins and our lunges. So for my knee-ins, I'm back down on the ground in plank position, and I'm gonna bring my knees in and out. Knees in and out. Okay, for my beginners, I'm gonna start it out one knee at a time. One knee at a time. So that's gonna count as one each time. Then I'm gonna go into my lunges. So I'm gonna keep it on the same leg, right? I'm gonna do 10 on one side, then I'm gonna do 10 on the other side. All right, guys, let's walk through one round, and I'll show you what it looks like. All right, guys, so for this exercise, it's gonna be timed. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open up my phone, and I'm gonna move it to stopwatch. And whenever I'm ready, I'm just gonna hit start, set it down on the floor, so I've got my timer. But what I'm gonna do today, because I do have my watch, I'm just gonna do with the timer on my watch, which makes it a little bit easier for me. So I'm gonna get into position. So again, we're gonna do jump squats and shoulder taps. 15 jump squats, 20 shoulder taps. When I'm done with that, I've got a minute to finish those and then rest. And we're gonna start in 3, 2, 1, and 15 jump squats. Remember, if you can't do the jump squats, you're not quite there yet, it's all right, just do your body weight squats. Good. 9, here's 10, 5 more. Make sure you're landing soft, not hard on the ground. Try to land on the balls of your feet. 1 more. Good, now taking it down into my shoulder taps. I'm gonna go 1, try to keep that core nice and tight. Try to keep those hips from swiveling back and forth. Good, 1 more each side. Good. All right, guys, 43 seconds, so I've got 17 seconds to rest. Now during your workout, you're gonna go five rounds, so you're gonna do this 4 more times. But what I'm gonna do is jump to the next one. All right, we got 3, 2, 1, and into my bend and thrust. Again, got 15 here. The faster I move, the more time I have to rest. Good, I've got 2 more. If you need to take a little pause, catch your breath in between, check your time. Then moving on to side push-ups. Good, get a little bit wider with my base. Gonna run out of time here, guys. Got another 3, 2, 1, no time to rest. Took a little bit too much time doing that one. So directly into knee ends. Got 15 to go. You always monitor your time. If you run out of time, it's okay. You just move on. 2 more. Good. And I'm gonna bring it up into my lunges. I'm gonna keep it same side. You can tell, I'm already breathing hard. One more on this side, and then move it over to the other. Gotta hurry, 10 seconds left. Last one, and that's time. All right, guys, as you can see, doesn't leave you a lot of time, but it's an excellent workout. If you need to adjust the numbers just a little bit, that's all right, but 15 to 20, 15 on the first exercise, 20 on the second, 5 rounds. All right, guys, thanks again for watching. Stay safe, and I hope you're all taking care of each other. Bye.
All right. Hope the endorphins are flowing after watching Jeremy, working along with Jeremy's fitness. If for some reason you don't want to do it right now, you're working, you're busy, we do break Jeremy's out separately on TechStrong.tv and on the TV app, so you can do them at night or whenever's convenient for you. But Jeremy gives you a good workout there, and we highly recommend it. Next, we're going to head over to our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon. Charlene has 2 good interviews today. One I mentioned is with Quinn Slack, CEO of SourceGraph. I think SourceGraph is one of the best developer tools I've seen in a while. I mean, the searching for snippets and stuff within your source code is amazing. I like it a lot. But Quinn's going to talk a lot about how SourceGraph is making out in a remote environment with COVID, and it should be a good one. And then Charlene has a second one with Jason Rader, National Director, Network and Cloud Security at Insight Enterprises, and she'll be talking with him on that. So without further ado, let's head things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor, Media Ops.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Thanks, Alan. Welcome back to TechStrong TV, everybody. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops. I'm here with Quinn Slack, who is the CEO and co-founder of a company called SourceGraph. Quinn, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Charlene. It's great to be here.
Tell me a little bit about your company. Let's start that.
We are SourceGraph. I'm the co-founder and CEO, and our product is code search. So if you are a company that's got big code, tons of developers, tons of complexity, which is most companies these days that are building software, then you and all of your developers need code search to manage that and still be productive and build software. So code search, think of a little search box that looks across all of the code in your organization, no matter where it is, what language it is, all history, all tools that you might use, one place to go for developers to find answers that they need so they can get their job done.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to talk to you today because I understand SourceGraph is an all virtual company. You guys don't have a physical headquarters, am I correct?
That's right. We have not always been that way, though. We started out in the very early days with some people remote and some people based in SF. And coincidentally, unrelated to COVID-19, we decided to go all remote in January. We gave up our office in February. So we got a little bit of a preview of this transition that a lot of companies are going through, not having chosen to now.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, I wanted to talk to you about, maybe some of the things that you guys have learned along the way and how other companies can apply that. But, I find it interesting because I've worked for companies on site. I've worked for companies that were all virtual, and Media Ops is a hybrid company. I work virtual, and they have headquarters as well that folks work in. But it's definitely a different lifestyle, work style, working remotely than in-house. Did you guys notice a difference when you decided to go virtual and your employees they're all scattered everywhere, I imagine. Did you guys notice any difference in the way folks started to work, or any issues that they were having kind of adopting this new work style?
Yeah, well, it certainly is not for everyone. When we first floated the idea of going all remote, there were several people who were working in our San Francisco office who said, well, I don't want to go remote. I love to work in an office. And coincidentally, those 3 people are actually the first ones to decide, once we were all remote, to go and move to Idaho, to all the way across the world to Singapore.
Wow.
So I'm not sure why that happened, but it was a scary idea at first. And I think that in tech, a lot of people believe that tech is doing all these new things, but I think we've seen this transition before. Back when everyone was working in the farms or foraging, the idea of working in a factory seemed crazy, but people adapted. Not to say, that was great. When people had no concept of getting into an office and sitting down in front of a screen every day, well, it turns out millions of people adapted to that. And so we're just starting this remote work transformation in tech. We've seen other industries doing this for a long time. So many accountants, so many professional services have always been remote. And so tech is not doing anything new here. I think we have a lot to learn from these other industries that have been working in this way for a long time.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think because, technology does kind of rely on collaboration and communication among various folks in different departments to create and to build these new advancements in technologies that they really need to be on site. But to your point, I mean, we've seen the same thing happen in other vertical markets as well. And one thing that I've always kind of found interesting is, to your point, that folks who are working at home don't have to be located in a tech-centric area such as San Francisco or Seattle or wherever. It actually, at least in my mind, it actually kind of helps everybody, because they can finally move to an area, do the job that they love, and be in an area that's maybe more cost effective for them, or they're closer to family, or it's better for their work-life balance, things like that. So I get the feeling that a lot of organizations are really going to see the true benefits of this new kind of work from home paradigm. Are you, you said that you've got 3 employees who have kind of made that decision to do that. Do you think that's going to be a trend among your other employees as well?
Yeah, we've seen it happen among more folks. We have about 35 people total, and people are now all around the world: Australia, Singapore, France, Germany, Poland, England, South Africa, all around the US, South America. People, when you have the ability to live anywhere you'd like, that opens up people's minds. And when they know it's not just for a temporary stint, but we've been around for 7 years at SourceGraph, we will continue to be around, and they can plan their lives around this geographic flexibility, then that opens up the options in a really magical way for people.
Yeah. So, have you guys noticed any issues though related to kind of this, having a workforce that's distributed throughout the world?
Yeah, it is tough to do. I don't think it's harder than the job of running any kind of large company. Even if you're all in the same office, it's not like, oh, you just snap your fingers and everyone collaborates. There's a lot of communication that needs to happen. So it's hard, but I don't think it is harder than the alternative. The thing that we have found is most important is getting away from this idea of communication by shoulder tap. The idea that if you're in an office and you get blocked, you need to get some question answered, you can go tap someone on the shoulder and immediately find out the answer. That's nice when it works. But if everyone is doing that, then your shoulders are constantly being tapped. So you need to find a way, I think regardless of whether you're remote or in person, to let people work for long periods of time, have the information they need already available, or give them a way so they can find out that information on their own. So for coders, this can mean having things written in advance. It can mean having better documentation. One thing we see, of course, is having code search lets people answer their own questions by finding the answer in the code, finding the right place, the right usage example, instead of going and tapping someone on the shoulder. Or the remote instance of that is messaging someone on Slack and interrupting them. So don't think that just because you're on Slack, just because people are working apart from each other remotely, that you are suddenly this, paragon of a remote efficiency. The number one thing is getting away from the shoulder tap. And I think that applies no matter, what kind of company you are.
Yeah, I would agree. And our company, obviously, like everybody else, is now working remotely. And so now we have a daily Scrum meeting that we do every morning. And then the rest of the day is, basically communication by Slack or email. And, one thing that I've noticed, and I'm wondering if you guys have noticed as well, is, you say communication by shoulder tap, but I kind of feel like I'm living a life of, death of 1,000 Slack messages. So, how can companies kind of rein that in a little bit better so that their employees don't feel overwhelmed by the sheer number of Slack-based shoulder taps, if you will?
Well, what we do, two things. One is we try to manage the volume of interruptions, and two is we try to reduce it. So to manage it, it's really helpful for us to have one inbox. It's difficult to know that the little notification icon on Slack is blowing up, your emails are blowing up, maybe text messages, maybe on your CRM. So we try as much as possible to have one place where if you really need to reach someone, you know that is their inbox, and that's email. Slack is great, but we really try to keep that for short-term ephemeral conversations. And one thing we do to enforce that is we have Slack message retention, so that in all of our public channels, everything is deleted after 30 days. And that means that that if something is really important, really permanent, you can't just put it in Slack. You need to put it in the actual place where it lives, in a document, in the CRM. And that's helped. The other thing is, for leaders especially, whenever you do feel that you need to tap someone on the shoulder on Slack, i.e., at message them, private message them, you should still do it if you really need to, but think about how could you have created the environment where you wouldn't have needed to interrupt that person, where they would have known to proactively do something, communicate the information, and vice versa. You can't rely on everyone on the team knowing how to do this, because for leaders, you're the ones who can see all of the problems going on, all of the communication channels. So take each time you need to interrupt someone as a little case study and what could you have done? What processes could you put into place to have avoided that? And then be deliberate about that and tell people that that's what you're doing. And I guarantee you that if you're a leader and you tell people, hey, we're trying to reduce the number of interruptions you have, everyone on your team is going to be cheering you along.
Right. Well, so to that point, then there is the other end of the of the equation, which is not communicating with your employees, or your employees not communicating enough. So, how do you strike that balance, and what do you do to encourage the right kind of communication? Because you don't want everybody working in their own little island.
Yeah, that's true. For coders, depending on the tools you use, I think that can be less of a problem, but there's a few things you can do to make this better. When people start working on code, encourage them as a good development practice and communication practice to push that branch up, even if it's work in progress. And if you see resistance, then work on those. One example of resistance that we've seen is people are embarrassed when their code is not yet ready and they don't want to push it up. They are worried that if they push it up, then people are going to go and jump on it and say, oh, you made a mistake here and over here. So that's a cultural problem. And again, if you tell the team, we would like to get so that we are not communicating by demand, but communicating proactively, you explain why you're doing this, and then you tell everyone, no one likes having their code picked apart before it's ready. I think people will understand, and you can work through that cultural problem and make it so people actually are really excited by getting their code up. That's certainly works for developers. Mm-hmm. And I think a similar thing applies to other types of functions in the company. We have our product team, our sales team, our marketing team. And the more that you can be working in, for example, Google Docs that are shared with everybody, even if things aren't ready, the more that you can maintain those really nice serendipitous interactions that happen in an office. Because with going remote, there are fantastic things about an office, about these serendipitous interactions, and you need to maintain those. And having people work in public makes that certainly easier.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What about that social aspect, though?
This has
gotten doing anything there?
It's gotten a lot harder with COVID, of course.
Right.
Now, before the coronavirus shut down travel, made it so you couldn't gather, we were really deliberate about making sure we got together as a team in person for FaceTime, for quality time. And if you take over the course of a year, think about the people that you work with in an office. You have lunch with them, you chat with them, you get to hear about their lives, but it's a little bit each day, and that's great. But if you are deliberate, and even though if you're remote, you're not with them every day, but if when you get together, you spend a whole day or 2 whole days going around a new city and exploring it together, that kind of quality time in many ways is better than those superficial interactions through the course of a year. And that had worked really well for us. We have remote team members at SourceGraph that I felt I was closer to and knew better than people that were in the office. Now, that's a lot harder to do with COVID-19. So we're doing some things to make up for that, like having just 30-minute just chat meetings with team members and ask them about their lives. I just had one before this, and I heard about how somewhere in Germany is opening up, how they have no Whole Foods, and this person's vacations around the US, and it's great to build that personal connection. And, frankly, with everyone being at home, I think people crave that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right there. Well, Quinn, thank you so much for talking with me about this. This is, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it really is an important topic that I think a lot of companies really haven't investigated fully. They just kind of had to be in this new normal, if you will, and there are so many different aspects of the work from home paradigm that I think companies really have to explore if this is something that they want to continue after the pandemic has passed. So thanks again for your insight and your time. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Charlene, and hope everyone stays safe and healthy.
Great. All right, well, stay tuned. We've got more TechStrong TV coming up, so please stick around.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Thanks, Alan. Welcome back, everybody. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops. And, one of the things that a lot of folks have been talking about these days is just the way that we're working these days. And, since the COVID-19 crisis has, changed the way we do work. Obviously, collaboration tools have become kind of, center to a lot of our daily interactions. But of course, that does give rise to a lot of security concerns. And obviously, we've all heard about Zoom bombing, and I'm sure that that's the most public one out there. But I'm sure that there are lots of other security concerns when we're talking about collaboration platforms. And so with that in mind, I have my next guest here, who is Jason Rader. He's the National Director of Network and Cloud Security at Insight Enterprises, and hopefully he will be able to clue us in on a little bit about collaboration tools and the need for security. So Jason, thank you so much for taking a few minutes and talking with me today.
It's my pleasure.
Great. So let's talk about really what we're looking at when it comes to collaboration tools and security. What are some of those security concerns around the different conferencing collaboration platforms? And is it limited to just the video conferencing platforms such as Zoom or Microsoft Meetings or anything, or those types of platforms?
Right. Great question. I think that, from a collaboration platform perspective, these things are really robust. And a lot of folks have been using them, kind of like you said, from a more video perspective, those kind of video calls, maybe for client-facing calls or those kinds of things. And they're not necessarily aware of all of the additional capabilities of a lot of these. And in doing so, so certainly there's been some talk of certain collaboration platforms that are less secure or more secure, those types of things. But honestly, I don't believe that's, to your point, one of the biggest concerns that a lot of folks should have related to this. Mm-hmm. So there was a time when we wanted to really rapidly deploy some capabilities, and some folks are still in the middle of doing that. Yeah. And now that we've enabled a bunch of users with some capabilities, maybe more so than the organizations actually planned on pushing out, because again, this is there's a learning curve related to enabling these new capabilities. Now we've given our user base this capability to do some great creation of data, to work with other members of their own organizations and exchange data. And then there's that question that I think is something that really should be considered, is what happens and how do we classify that new data that is created, and how folks are able to be quite honest, they're trying to do the best thing. Everybody's working really hard to do the right thing right now, but copying databases down to a local store and then editing them and then exchanging that information is something that could really expose an organization related to that kind of workflow when it's unsanctioned or controlled.
All right, so it's not just during the conversation or during the use of the collaboration tool, but following as well. That's interesting. I don't think a lot of people have really thought about that. So, is it a matter then of user education? And if so, is it something maybe that companies need to kind of incorporate into their educating their employees and possibly even onboarding?
Without question. So I think, it's been said, I'm a 25-year security guy, right? And when we always talk about security, the biggest risk that you have to your organization are untrained and unaware users. And the biggest asset that you can have for your organization are trained and aware users. And I know that we're kind of delving into, an area that we haven't delved into before, right. But it's a point where, again, users, thinking that InfoSec or IT or different areas of the organization are the only people with security responsibilities is a little short-sighted, of course, because enabling your users certainly on onboarding, letting them know, what data is about, how we manage it. Of course, if you have a data classification program, which you should, explaining how that works and consistently reminding your folks. So I definitely believe, regardless of the technology, having a strong governance model in place that says, here's the types of data that we have, here's how we use them, here's what's acceptable. And then if we do go to the cloud or we go to, mobile devices and using this stuff, aware users who've been trained and reminded are going to be able to make good decisions, because you can't control every decision that a user, especially in a mobile workforce, is going to make. They're making those ethical decisions on a daily basis.
Well, I know that there are a lot of organizations that just don't allow the regular use of collaboration tools like Google Docs and things like that.
Sure.
but we're talking about a different time now. I mean, these are desperate times call for desperate measures, right? So have you seen a relaxation of some of these rules among some of these organizations that recognize that, for some people it may be the only way that they can get access to information and be able to share it effectively, especially since, we've been hearing so much about VPNs and the kind of the overall failure of VPNs because they just can't handle the load on a regular basis. So, what are you seeing as far as organizations and their kind of thought process regarding enabling and allowing their employees to use these tools?
I think you nailed it. So there's a maturity model that I like to talk about. And a lot of folks, especially when we're talking to IT folks that are usually kind of responsible for pushing these capabilities out, there's that rapid response or rapid deployment that has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a really important as you mature up the maturity model. So first it's, can we do it? Then it's, what have we done? What's the new normal? What have we defined at this point?
Oh my God, what have we done, right?
And then it's a really important aspect of any maturity models. Now that we've defined the new normal, we've got to refine it. So we've got to manage and optimize it. And I think a lot of folks, then there's that whole compartmentalization that happens within organizations where, oh, that's their responsibility or whatever. So to your point, I think in a kind of desperate time, we've pushed out some capabilities. We can't forget that there's a maturity model that goes, and we've got to define this new normal. We're not going to go back to the way that we used to, period. I mean, folks who thought they might never be able to do this are now doing it. So we're going to adopt some of these technologies, some of these workflow processes, and people are going to adapt. And that's great. That's fantastic. That's a forcing function for us to move to the next level. But we can't rely on the fact, okay, in security, there's three tenets of it, right? There's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That availability part, can we get it available to the users? We've done, but we've got to go back and make sure that the confidentiality and integrity aspects from a security perspective, can we prove compliance now that we've moved to this new model? All of those things they're not the cool kind of hackers hacking into our meeting kind of stuff. It's really just classic governance model security that's got to go back into play, and we've got to revisit that.
All right. So since you already answered my next question, which is whether we'd be seeing an increase in these platforms' use even after the work from home edict has passed, how do you see these platforms changing then to accommodate? Do you think that they're going to become more robust from a security standpoint? Maybe even, I don't know, like a little bit more user friendly as far as security is concerned, guessing that the user isn't maybe as security conscious or security aware, and so actually instituting security controls on their behalf? Or what do you kind of see happening?
I definitely believe that there's going to be more robust capabilities. As you can see, those roadmaps have been accelerated on a lot of folks that are kind of getting called out from a security perspective in certain areas. Not picking on those guys. It's just one of those things. I think we use the platforms for something that was completely different now than what we're expected to use them for. So there are some folks that are definitely more integrated and farther ahead of the game, but I don't think that puts anybody out because, again, there's price points, there's user acceptance and usability. So I definitely believe that there's going to be more of that stuff coming from the providers of those platforms. But to our earlier point, though, users and how they use this data, like it's really easy for us to record this meeting right now, to push record and to record this. And then a lot of folks will naturally, put that in a repository somewhere, not realizing that I've just recorded an internal meeting where we're talking about financials or intellectual property that we just posted to YouTube because we wanted our other teammates to be able to access it. I've seen it before and I'm like, hey guys, we really shouldn't have posted this to YouTube. That's not a good idea. And it's just that kind of, again, we got to remember the kind of data that we're creating, especially with new things like CCPA and other consumer privacy, acts that are going out is, if we're talking about individuals in these things and making recordings of them, we're creating additionally personally identifiable information that could, we'll be liable for a number of reasons. And again, we just got to be aware of how the entirety of what we're using these platforms for is exposing us to.
So that involves some governance on behalf of the organization. Then they need to come up with some sort of rules to tell folks, if you're going to be using these platforms for this, then you can do this and you can't do that. But do you think that that's going to be enough?
It's definitely not going to be enough, but it's going to be the start. I think, that top down kind of approach to this, people do what they think leadership expects of them. So we've got to at least have that kind of thing. And it can't come from IT. I mean, I know a lot of folks, those guys really do drive a lot of the security initiatives within the organizations, but it's got to be a partnership. So I've been talking to a lot of our clients now, they're kind of in the same mode. And I'm like, it can't just be one part of the organization that's got to be committed to this. This is a great time for leadership to kind of step up and say, hey, here's what we're doing. We're trying to enable us. We're trying to go forth in this particular time. And this is the way that we can do it. And then let everybody, and make sure everybody's kind of got a plan. I've talked to a lot of folks who IT handled it. They knew what was going on, but the business units who the organization acquired assets for and had a plan and those types of things really weren't able to execute on that plan because they never thought they were going to have to. And that's one of the things where, again, leadership kind of coming over and saying, this is important to us, and everybody and then again, to that maturity model perspective, making sure that we go back and refine that. It's not just a plan that sits on the shelf or something that's, that we don't follow up on. Enforcement is very much key.
Well, that makes sense. And then also, to your point, going back and finessing it as you go along, it's got to be a living document. I would imagine, especially as, the rules change and more folks are doing more from pretty much anywhere, after the work from home mandates have passed, I firmly believe that I think people really kind of like working this way, and they'll definitely incorporate parts of it into their day-to-day after all this is passed. But so just a couple final thoughts. Do you have any kind of best practices, if you will, for organizations that are dealing with this new influx of collaboration tool use by their employees, and then and maybe perhaps ways that they can better secure their data on these collaboration platforms, and then also maybe some of the things that users themselves can do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what and again, within my own organization, we'd have had to give guidance out because, again, to my point earlier, there are some platforms that are less secure than others, and that's okay, but it depends on what you're using that platform for. So in some cases, we're suggesting we use our own corporate platforms for meetings that have proprietary information or customer information being exchanged. Again, from a corporate responsibility perspective, we're liable for that data, and we've got to show the prudence that we have related to doing things appropriately. From a user perspective, again, we get in an interesting situation. We've got corporate assets that sit at home. We're on our own Wi-Fi. We can do whatever we want after 5 kind of stuff. There's definitely some guidance that, folks do what you would do at work on those machines, because realize you're exposing your organization once you reconnect to the VPN and are connected back to corporate with whatever happened before you got there. And folks like us, we work from home and travel all over the place and do that kind of stuff on a regular basis and are kind of aware of that. Folks who just got issued a laptop via FedEx and are now working like that don't necessarily realize what they're exposing the organization to when they're, doing things that, playing games and those kinds of things online, great, but you click the wrong link, you get infected with some malware, and then you connect back to the VPN and you're in. And because the organization wasn't necessarily ready for those kind of connections that they rapidly deployed, the monitoring isn't in place. So again, it's back to that kind of maturity model again. But I really, users want to do the right thing. So we've got to give them that guidance to do it. And I think, again, we're all moving forward, and these new capabilities are going to make us all better.
Excellent. Well, Jason, thanks for taking a couple minutes and talking with me. Excellent stuff. I know that organizations are still grappling with it, and they probably will for a while. So any advice that they can take away from this, I'm sure they really appreciate it. So thanks again for your expertise and your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Great. All right, guys, stay tuned. We've got plenty more TechStrong TV coming up, so stick around.
Okay, thanks, Charlene. Well, if Charlene is finished for the day, it's time for the head over to the Analyst Corner with Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. Mitch has a recent presentation he gave on a DevSecOps best practices to increase adoption that he's going to talk about. And then he has an interview with Sentry's Milan Desai. He'll tell you more about that. So let's head on over to Mitchell.
The adoption of DevOps is no easy topic. Organizations in very different places. Some are just getting started. Some have been on this journey for a while, maybe up to close to 10 years now. I guess we're getting close to a decade. We're at least approaching that, of thinking about software in terms of DevOps and adopting that kind of practice. And there are all kinds of best practices that are available out there. You'll see lists that usually encompass things like testing automation, CI/CD, the core essential elements of DevOps. And those are all great things. But I thought I would add some perspective to that. Having gone through my own DevOps adoption, running an IT organization, and then running a services company that leveraged a software team, a couple software teams doing DevOps. And it can be very challenging to take on a new approach. Oftentimes you're not just doing DevOps, but you're involved in other activities, especially around software architectures, going to the cloud, doing things like containers, maybe doing Kubernetes, et cetera. So it really, at least in my experience, happens in isolation that you're suddenly going to adopt DevOps. And one of the reasons is DevOps is about really breaking down work into much smaller pieces and doing them much more quickly. So you can get, for example, information about it, testing, once code gets checked in very quickly. So you get super fast feedback, and feedback that's going to help developers create better code in a shorter cycle of time, rather than waiting for a big integration test process to run that might happen on the night or at night or on the weekends. So with that means, in order to iterate on code that quickly, oftentimes you're shifting to more of a cloud native, or at least elements of it, containerized and Kubernetes managed containerized environment, or other equivalent kinds of technology. So they're nice coupling between those two, because they both are about making things smaller and then making things faster because you're working on smaller units of work. So that's something to consider as you're looking at adopting DevOps, or if you're already on your journey and thinking about how the work itself is being broken down into smaller elements, and also a DevOps process which lets you iterate much, much faster. Now, underlying all of this really is this idea of continuous improvement. Yes, we talk about continuous integration, we talk about continuous delivery. Those are obviously central to a DevOps process. But underlying this is really getting better at what we do on a continual basis. Now, if you have a background or you have some training in quality management, like total quality management or Six Sigma, that can be a huge leg up, because you've got some process, you've got some tools, some methods of helping you identify what are root causes, or even more importantly, what are some of the bottlenecks you may be encountering. If you don't have that training, there's certainly a lot of good books on DevOps, continuous improvement, and quality. I'd certainly recommend checking out. But that idea of continuous improvement is essential, because in a DevOps world, we're continually maturing, I guess is the word maturing our processes, maturing our software, maturing our automation, maturing our ability to deliver software in an integrated pipeline, and integrating folks from across the organization. So it's not one or two or three steps. It's an ongoing thing that we need to work at. So think about continuous improvement and how you might adopt that mentality, that methodology as part of your organization to really shore up and provide the underpinning of why you're doing DevOps and some of the benefits that you can get from it. Now, tool chains, CI/CD, people, process, technology, security, shift left, all of those are great and important things. But think about that continuous improvement and how that might be the underpinning of your strategy, as well as how you adopt DevOps as part of your organization.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Digital Anarchist.
I'm joined by Milan Desai, who is CEO of Sentry, and our topic is finding issues in code in production. That sounds pretty interesting. I'm curious to find out more. Hey, good to have you on. Good to talk with you, Milan.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit about the company, Sentry, and also, of course, your CEO. Kind of a pretty good idea what your role is, but we can kind of get into how you got there. Just tell us a little bit about Sentry.
Sure. I wanted to start off by actually thanking the people on the front line who have been helping us fight this battle with COVID. And given that I have an audience right now, I would encourage all listeners, especially the ones who can afford it, to contribute to your local food banks and get that company match going. I think it would go a long way to helping our society in general and the people who need help. So, I wanted to kind of start off with that. And again, thank the people on the front lines who've been helping us through this kind of very unique situation that we are facing.
I agree. Thankfully, we have them, and appreciate your ideas of ways people can help. That's always great. Thanks for doing that, Milan.
So when you think about Sentry, we focus on developers and we help them diagnose, fix, and optimize their code as it runs in production. So what does that really mean? Most of us users have faced either playing like gaming on a desktop and the game crashes, or being on a mobile device and the application crashes, or you're about to check out and the payment doesn't go through on an app, or if you're an enterprise software user, a certain page doesn't load, or a report is not rendering correctly. These are all issues that we as users face when we use B2C software, B2B software. And what we do as Sentry is help now almost 55,000 teams, software teams, find those issues as you're running into them in close to real time, give the developer all the context around it and help them fix that, right? So avoid those kind of issues, or help developers find those issues as customers are hitting them either in production or in a canary deployment. So kind of reducing the delta between the consumer of software, which is the user, and the producer of the software, which is developer, and giving all of that full context, which would typically take, 2 days, 3 days, tickets. Sometimes the user just goes away. Hey, I'm not going to use the app anymore. I'll just buy nails from the other company, or I'll just use the other ride sharing software. So that's what we really help, which is connect kind of developers to outcomes of their code, and get results, and have happier customers, greater retention, and save hours in terms of development time going forward.
Interesting. I'm anxious to get into this. Before we do, tell us a little bit about your journey, what you've been doing, and I think you've been with the company for about 4 months or so, if I recall. How did you want to become the CEO of this company?
Yeah, it's been a very interesting journey for me. If I had to kind of take a step back and look at the industry as a whole, we spent the early part of 2000 to 2010 building software-defined infrastructure. That's where I spend most of my time. And then this past decade, it was all about cloud and API and SaaS. And so I transitioned at VMware as general manager for cloud services, focused on our transition to SaaS at that point in time, building SaaS services and being cloud-centric, cloud first, right? And it was then when I realized, as I was deploying these SaaS services, that we are spending a lot of time on infrastructure, monitoring systems and machines. But as my developers were pushing code out to production, these issues that we just talked about, like, hey, the page is not rendered correctly since the last push, or something is gone awry, how do I find that out, right? And so it was really kind of interesting to kind of look at the perspective of the developer and say, how do I know the impact of my code in production? And so I became a user of Sentry for my SaaS services, fell in love with it, which is when I received a call saying, hey, we're looking for someone to join the team. And that's how I got hooked onto Sentry. And it was really interesting because I was looking for three things: a developer-centric company, which was open source, and which was SaaS. And it checked off all those three boxes, because I truly believe this next decade, or this decade that we're in, is going to be the decade for the developer. And
Totally agree with you there.
And that kind of got me going in that. So it was really interesting to kind of see this service as a customer first, solve problems for me and our teams, the developers that are at VMware, and then of course make that transition now as CEO.
Interesting. I have a question about that. Well, hopefully we'll have time to get to later. So talk a little bit about, I mean, normally the conditions you describe when those kinds of errors or situations, experiences occur for end users, you know, you have tools like, you know, turning on diagnostics, maybe in mobile apps that capture additional information about apps, things like that. Of course, all kinds of logs. Sometimes maybe too much information. So what is it in addition to that you bring that helps make it more obvious, more clear where the issues might be, or how to help resolve some of those problems that customers experience?
That's a fantastic question, by the way. So I'll kind of give you, if you don't have Sentry, your typical process in that would be an issue occurred, and it could be, it was happening for one user, or it could be happening for thousands of users.
Mm-hmm.
How would you know about that issue unless the user actually files the issue, or somebody actually tells you about it on Twitter or on some social medium? So most times I would say users walk away, especially if you're kind of in the B2C space. It's the patience, right? The consumer experience is all about being instant, being perfect, being personal. And so how do you always deliver that aspect? So a lot of times you don't even know that a user is hitting their issue, they walk away. That's what I experienced, where a couple of my users were like, we tried it, you know, wasn't that stable. So, you know, we moved on to the next task.
Mm-hmm. And you never know, right? Unless they say something, right? For sure.
So that's one, right? But then if they do, you know, say, oh, I have an issue, you're going to parse through logs. You're going to search logs. You're going to find where the issue is. There'll be a support person. You may even have the customer reproduce the issue for you because you don't know the exact steps. So imagine all of this process, which typically would have a lot of turnaround time between the developer, the customer, the support person, the customer success person. We reduce all of that. As the issue is hit, you get a notification on your alerting tool of choice. And it's not just a notification which says a customer is hitting an issue. It will say X customers are hitting an issue. It's only happening on this version of an Android device or an iOS device. Here's the actual, you know, it's only happening on this version of your software, because now we have multiple versions of our software running externally.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
It has all the context down to the line of code where the issue was occurring. So you didn't have to go look for log file. No, it's this issue happening on this device, on this version. This is a piece of code. Here's the line of code. Here's the potential committer who committed that code, right? All of that context, rich context, right at the doorstep of the developer that was developing it, including what we call as breadcrumbs, which shows you all the steps that led to that issue. Right. And so all of this is packaged up in a very clean way, which essentially saves on an average 2 days of turnaround time per issue. Plus, of course, you know, we've had customers who've fixed the issue before the end customer reported the issue, right? So that turnaround time around customer experience and satisfaction is key. And so like a tackle.io, you know, told us that, hey, you know, one of their large customers hit an issue before they even reported it, we fixed it for them. So that's why we do this uniquely. It's not like you cannot do it without Sentry, but all of this context in one place, and the workflows around it integrated into Jira, integrated into your Git repository, and all the aspects associated with that is what we bring to the table. Additional context, additional metadata, quicker turnaround, and the fact that we are uniquely positioned to handle desktops, browsers, IoT devices, and mobile devices as a company.
Interesting. So if I can kind of come back, what I'm hearing is you're essentially bringing all those assets, all that information together into one package, instantly or instantaneously after an issue happens, to try to give the developer, engineer, operations folks the best chance of understanding and resolving the issue as quickly as possible, as opposed to now that we have an issue, it's like, let me go to the 25 places where I have my Legos and I'll get them all together so I can figure out what's going on. Is that correct?
You hit the nail on the head. Perfect.
Okay. Interesting. Well, it sounds like, it's kind of one of those problems like, why hasn't anybody solved this before, right? How many times have we solved an error, a bug in test or production for that matter? And of course, now with DevOps and that environment, developers are even more engaged in the operations and vice versa with operations people. Is there an aspect of this that's really appealing to the DevOps crowd, or is it kind of the same whether you're doing DevOps or not?
So the user of the technology today is the developer. But here's an interesting trend we are starting to see, and you would appreciate it, is that there are teams called platform engineering teams at large organizations who are starting to serve their internal developer in terms of tooling, whether it's a CI/CD and other things. And one of the common things that we hear from DevOps folks is, I could build all the tooling in the world, but and I'm going to use, I'm not saying every time this is the case, but if shit comes in, shit will go out, right? And so the question then becomes, how do we get DevOps teams to move from monitoring infrastructure, machines, providing infrastructure for code, to now also providing the capabilities to allow almost like a filter saying, hey, use this so that we can deliver a better code quality experience to our customers. So we are starting to see the beginning signs of DevOps teams saying, let me bring Sentry in to essentially enhance my platform to deliver that better quality experience so that we are not constantly in this alerting, paging, shit goes in, shit comes out on the other side type discussion, right? So helping developers with, improve quality of code, kind of, hitting further up the pipeline, so to speak. And also, I think DevOps folks are starting to get more and more inserted on the code side of the house. So this allows them a way to participate in that discussion more proactively.
Okay, interesting. So what I'm connecting to is, and what you're saying is that with platform teams, sometimes they're called pipeline teams, that are building tooling the organization. It sounds like this is something that you're probably going to integrate in the CI, the build continuous integration process, so that it's in code. And as something happens, I assume there's some libraries or something, that modules or some microservices that you call or get called for you, and that helps assemble that information. Is that correct, or do you do it a little differently?
Yeah, the way we would kind of fit into that pipeline is the software gets released, and either in staging, if you have a staging environment, you would run this, right, along with your automated tests and try to find issues, regressions, and other things. We would catch those. We would catch issues between microservices, in that. Again, in code, not in machine and systems. The other interesting aspect about this is increasingly people are doing kind of canary deployments or, blue-green. So, hey, especially in those scenarios when you're pushing out new code, imagine now, not only are you seeing, is everything scaling well on my infrastructure, systems, machines, but is the code delivering the outcomes that we expect it to? So the first 100, 200, 10,000 users and their experience and the issues could be caught much earlier before you roll it out to everyone else. So, and when an issue is found, we would file, it would go into your Jira ticket, become part of the Git repository integration. It's integrated into PagerDuty, Slack, and other aspects. So it's kind of full life cycle in that. And so that's how we kind of fit into that platform tool set.
Really interesting. I mentioned I had a question, or I wanted to talk about the developer side of this with something that folks at our analyst firm and also the media ops refer to as the democratization of software, which is, enterprise sales of software is really transforming. Yeah, it's still happening, but so much more of it is developer driven, kind of bottom up, if you will. And how people sell to people sell to developers is much different than you would kind of an enterprise sale. What's your philosophy or approach to selling to the developer community? How do you do that? What things are important to how you do that?
So it's been, one of the things which is really interesting about Sentry is we essentially are a bottoms-up motion, as you mentioned, which is there are three things which are interesting. One is, of course, we're open source, so that is definitely a point of attraction
It's
for our
huge,
customers.
hugely important. I mean, in my world, that's like number one. If you're in that camp, you're already hold some shared values with many, many developers.
But here's the other interesting aspect. When we say we're open source, our SaaS service, which is what customers pay for, all the features and functions are available in the open source version. So there is no discrimination if you decide to run the open source yourself, self-hosted, versus using the SaaS service. So it's the same functionality
So
in
no
that.
crippleware, no delayed introduction of features, all that.
So we do that. I think what the delay only comes in terms of we are trying something out, and before we kind of scale it and other things, so you're not able to adopt it. But the end goal is everything kind of gets to the open source community, and there's no feature delta in that. So I think that's really one aspect that we stick to and we believe in terms of our core philosophy. The other aspect is, developers learn from the communities they are in, the value that they get from that, and they like to try things out. So we offer a free kind of version which gives almost all the functionality, but to the hobbyist or a small project or a startup, they can start without paying us anything. Right, so it's very frictionless in that regard, and then everything else from there on in is self-serve. So a majority of our customer base is self-serve. They come online, they use our service, they swipe a credit card, pay us $29 a month, and they're off to the races. So I think being part of that open source community, being part of our developer communities, which is where we've kind of participated mostly, engaging that community and then making it frictionless for them to try the technology, use it, and integrate it in their other toolkit is what is needed, and that's what I think we are doing and we continue to do as a team.
I'm curious, how much of an adjustment has that been for you? We're coming from VMware. Now, obviously, they're going after the application, moving up the stack and trying to getting out of just being virtualization, operational infrastructure company. How was that shift for you? Were you already there and kind of struggling while you were at VMware? I'm not trying to get any secrets or anything, but I'm just curious, going from that environment to a really a developer-centric environment is a big shift.
It is, and I'm very fortunate that VMware gave me the opportunities to grow as an individual during my time there. And it was during my last stint running SaaS, working with our development teams, that I started kind of understanding, that the thing we talked about, that, oh my goodness, developers are starting to take control of where we go next, and we need to do more for them. And yes, Kubernetes is important, microservices are important, they will come, but these folks are operating in code, and they just look at the world and they seek the world differently. And so I was there in terms of kind of how they think and how my teams and the folks I worked with were operating. It is very, it's fun to walk in every day and see customers sign up for your service and pay for it and be happy about it, without you having to, do something, extra special in messaging or reach out and go back and forth. So there is that aspect which I really enjoy and appreciate. At the same time, we have some of our larger customers where we are engaged with them around how to work across teams. And, one of the things we are starting to see is, as adoption grows for Sentry in a company, you start asking questions like, hey, what areas of my code have greater issues, or which pages are having more issues than others, which sections of my code probably need more resources. Maybe I need to move some of my A players or my architects to look at this area, because we seem to have more trouble. So we are able to now have that level of discussion, and our product now delivers those type of insights to those teams. So it's been really interesting as this transition happens. But I would say, yeah, it's been it's been, the bottoms up, not having to interface with your customer, the machine just kind of takes care of it, has been good, and has been a great learning experience. So
I'm curious, do most folks that become customers start out with the open source, or is that less so? People usually will go right for the SaaS service.
we are finding out that being open source helps those customers know that we are part of the community, and then the economics of just using the SaaS service are just so high that most of them just choose that. It's like, hey, you know what? I'm a startup, $29 a month versus me hosting it, putting DevOps engineers and everything else, infrastructure. It just, the math adds up really well.
Do I want to take on one more thing that I have to run, support, now interface to fix, right? Versus that's your job. I'll pay $29 a month for that.
Correct.
Well, good. What's next for Sentry? What's kind of coming down the line for you?
So, a few things in terms of, of course, we are hyper focused on this area which we call error monitoring. And, we have the broadest platform coverage. So we are the only ones who support what I call as native applications. So things that, used in gaming industries as an example, right? So that's on one end. We have enhanced the support for mobile. So that's been really good. So kind of the breadth of platform, we are now set in that regard. And then the depth in language. So that's kind of one area that we continue to kind of drive as new languages come in, new integrations come in. Where where we are going next, and you will hear about this this quarter or in this quarter, is we talk about this notion that we are for every developer in code delivering software health. And so when we think about software health, we start with, of course, the issues that are in your software, helping you understand the trends in your code or software. And now increasingly starting to think about performance of your code. So you roll out your next push, and it's live, and you notice that the login page is slower, or the most accessed report is performing 35 points slower, or is only loading 50% of the time, right? So getting into code performance and giving those insights into, hey, the last push is causing these type of performance issues in code, again, to the same persona that is developer, is something which we are going to release this quarter. So going from not just errors, but also into performance and trends.
Well, good stuff. I wish you the best. Certainly a fun problem to solve, and one that I think everybody has. So that's a nice space to be in if you're going to start a company.
Absolutely.
Milind, it's been great to have you on talking on the video today. People can find out more. I think Sentry.io is your website, correct?
Yep.
So Milind Desai, CEO, appreciate you telling us more about what you do with Sentry and how your solving that problem for developers.
Thank you for having me.
You bet.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to protect yourself and others from spreading the virus. Prevention and personal safety is key. Here are the top ways you can protect yourself and others. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice social distancing and avoid high-risk potential people. If you are showing symptoms, stay at home. If you must go out, wear a face mask. Always cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue, or use the inside of your elbow. Clean and sanitize frequently touched surfaces daily. Together, we can prevent this pandemic.
Okay, hey everyone. We have a little bonus for you. It's Wednesday, which means it's Jane Grohl from the Humans of DevOps at DevOps Institute. I neglected when I did the promo earlier in the day about what we had in store today. So without further ado, let's bring on Jane from DevOps Institute.
Hi, everyone. It's Wednesday, and I always appreciate the opportunity to be on TechStrong TV. I hope this finds you well. I hope, and it finds you safe. This week, I want to talk about something that I think is really important, and that's the unsung heroes of the pandemic. The frontline workers, the healthcare professionals, the first responders, the grocery workers, the delivery people, absolutely are putting their health and their own safety on the line to make sure that we're okay. And we should be eternally grateful to them for their hard work and their selflessness. But there's a segment that I think has gone unrecognized, and that's the unsung heroes of the tech community. So many organizations had to pivot the way they work fast, right? They had to pivot people to work from home. They had to look at security. They had to look at flow. They had to look at how to continue business. In some situations, they needed to look at capacity. I mean, there were so many different considerations when very suddenly the whole world, regardless of where you are, was faced with a new way of working, a new normal. And depending on the line of business that you were in, that new normal may have had to happen very, very, very quickly. So, I mentioned a few weeks ago that I think that this concept of TechStrong is particularly significant because we're talking about TechStrong, meaning strong tech. And if anything, I think this horrible, horrible situation, which has had an unspeakable human toll, that has had unprecedented economic ramifications, and has really been a paradigm shift that has accelerated our move from being on-prem, and not just for your data center, right? On-prem for your people, for your process, for your technology, to a very, very remote way of working. It's changed our leadership styles. It's changed our productivity. It's changed our work environments for sure. And in some ways, it's changed the dynamic of our work-life balance, where you might have children at home, or you may be in complete isolation on your own. So there's been so many rapid changes. And our ability to succeed in this very, very confusing, uncharted time has largely been dependent on the quality of our tech, right? It is very much, how fast could your organization really change the entire way of working within a month's period of time. And again, looking at supply chains, looking at disruptions in supply chains, a lot of that wasn't only entirely dependent on how your organization was able to pivot, but how your suppliers and your partners were able to pivot as well. So it's a strange time. But I do think that this illustrates a couple of things. And I really want to focus on kind of that human aspect of where we are today. First of all, I think that the tech community deserves a lot of accolades for being able to successfully pivot. A large organization. I was talking to a CIO recently who literally had to get 9,000 people in a very old legacy organization to suddenly work from home. And he applauded his team because they really collaborated well in making that happen, right? And it was disruptive personally, professionally, from an enterprise perspective. But most organizations have been able to at least make some type of a jump from, again, a much more traditional environment to now. And that's largely because of the quality, not only of their tech, but of their technologists, right? Of their developers and their operations folks and their infrastructure folks and their SREs and their testers and their business allies, right? So there were so many humans involved in that transformation. And while we talk a lot about transformation in DevOps, we saw sudden transformation. And I think that, certainly the accolades has to go to that tech community. But I also think it's a time for technology assessment, both from a people perspective, right, from a skills perspective, from a process perspective, certainly, and from a technology perspective. This situation has really accelerated the mandate for transformation, digital transformation, but also human transformation. So I would hope that while we're all still trying to adapt and trying to stay in business, right, regardless of what business you're in, I'm hoping that there's a time for reflection, right? There's a time for capturing what worked, what didn't work, what did we end up having to sacrifice, what did we end up gaining when we've had to make a very, very sudden shift, right? This is more than business continuity, right? Business continuity has a plan, right? And in many cases, that plan could have been actionable, and in some cases, maybe the plan really didn't relate to this situation. And again, hopefully we're capturing those lessons that we're learning in this situation, because when we come out of it, and we will, I don't think we're going to go back to the old normal. I think there's a lot of discussion about what new normal looks like. I don't know what it looks like, right? I'm not a prophet. But I do think that there are definitely some lessons that we need to take away from this, not the least of which, if nothing else, this proves that your technology is not necessarily aligned with the business, it is the business. And being able to support the people that provide your technology, whether it's your internal staff, whether it's your consultants, whether it's your supply chain, now requires a significant investment. So when we come out of this and the new normal returns, I think that we're going to see that acceleration to the cloud. We're going to see that acceleration with the ability to analyze flow. But more importantly, I think we're going to see the acceleration of skills transformations, right? Because I would expect that some of the lessons that come out of this is what skills did we have and what skills did we not. Recently DevOps Institute released its 2020 Upskilling Enterprise DevOps Skills Report. And the results have been really fascinating. And you have to remember that this survey was done in late 2019, pre-pandemic. But I think the messages that are embedded in the direction that skilling needs to go is going to be something that when we do it again in 2021, it'll be interesting to measure the influence of the pandemic on this situation. And so a couple of things really came through. First of all, communication and collaboration, number one, human skill, and considered unequivocally across all the layers of the attendees, of the survey respondents rather, as being important, right? And again, now look at this situation. Your ability to collaborate remotely, your ability to collaborate in order to pivot, your ability to communicate, your ability to cooperate often might have been the factor that shaped whether you were able to pivot quickly or not, right? And so I definitely can see where communication and collaboration really took the top spot in the human skills. CI/CD, toolchain skills, took the top spot in technical, surpassing cloud by just a little tiny bit, but certainly cloud and the ability to improve flow, to be able to look at APIs in order to be able to deliver software more effectively and more efficiently, again, speaks to, I think in a lot of ways, how do we maintain some type of stability and some type of operating model in the current environment. And then we look at process, right? 1 and 2 pretty equal was source control models and flow. And again, how software flows in this current environment, we have installed, right? We still need to be able to adapt. A lot of the software vendors had to adapt very quickly because the number of customers really grew. I'm recording this on Zoom right now, and Zoom grew by 300 million users. Netflix reported, a crazy amount of exceeded expectations because people at home tended to gravitate towards more of these online tools. And so, while it's a good problem for them to have, they've also had to keep business going, to keep doing updates, to keep the software flowing, or in that case, streaming, so that they could take it forward. So, I've said this in a couple of weeks in a row. This is a really great time to learn, however you learn, right? However you learn. Take a look at that upskilling report. Look at some of the directions. Look at some of the quotes, recognizing that it is built on data that nobody expected would be reviewed after this, again, unprecedented global. This isn't a pandemic that's affecting a particular region of the world. It's affecting the whole world, which means coming out of it, the whole world needs to upskill, cross-skill, reskill, in order to be able to move into the next decade and beyond. And unfortunately, it took something as horrible as a pandemic to accelerate that movement. So for today, I just want to leave you with the thought, tech strong, right? Tech strong means we have to have strong tech. And strong tech begins with people, right? And people are the single most important success factor that you have in your organization. But people need skills, right? People need skills. Again, going back to the report, only 38% of the respondents said that they had a formal upskilling program. 20% said they were growing it. I think coming out of this, the investment in people needs to be better, right? Better, whatever that means, right? But it needs to be intentional. It needs to be better. And individuals, humans, need to take that intention as well, right? Grow your human skills, grow your technical skills, grow your process skills, right? Self-assess, practice, practice, practice. So be tech strong, right? Because it's only through tech strong that we get strong tech. So until next week, I'm Jane Grohl. I'm wishing you good health. I'm wishing you good learning, and I'm looking forward to spending some time with you again. Take care, everyone.
All righty. Thanks to Mitchell, Charlene, and all of our guests here today. Look, it was another, I left out Jeremy Jones, and thanks very much to Jeremy for the work he does on his work from home fitness. Guys, if you're joining along in the chat on TechStrong TV or on our Slack channel, at techstrongtv.slack.com. I thank you. Hope to hear more from you. And until then, though, we're going to wrap up. We'll be back tomorrow with another great show. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. Be safe, be healthy, be well, be strong. TechStrong.